Others will steal it.
We're in the middle of central London. Donny's wearing a blazer.
Come on.
Donny, what we here to do?
Do you know what? Meeting Sid, bruv. Sadiq Khan.
A little thanks to our mates over at Lyca.
That's well interesting to listen to, bro.
Yeah, do you want to wrap up all this?
Others will steal it.
Hi, Doni Brasco from Lyca Radio, by the way. I'm coming from an angle, like I mix with the community a lot. We hear a lot of opinions. And I think one of the amazing things I heard about you was being picked to be the first Green Mayor. And I think that was a big deal. Also, I think there's a bit of disarray with the Asian community of sometimes we don't feel that you're on our side because obviously, you being brown, we feel like you should back us a little bit, right? And then when we're hearing things and statements where it seems the more vulnerables, like the ethnic communities, even though they've not been contributing to the problems, they're the ones feeling the effects. And I think that disarray is misunderstood. And I think for this Lyca Radio, I'd love to hear what and how important the Asian communities are and what sort of things we can do to improve. And just to get back on this right path so we're back balanced again.
Right, let's just think about where many of our families' countries of origin are. India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. It's those countries suffering the worst consequences of climate change. And then look at London in relation to which communities in London are suffering the worst consequences of climate change and air pollution. It's those parts of London with the largest percentages of people of Asian origin. It's the Southalls, it's the Tower Hamlets, it's the Wembleys, it's the Brents. And so our policies are targeted at helping the most vulnerable, who happen to be, by the way, Asian Londoners, both in London, but also the most vulnerable around the world, who, by the way, tend to be people from many of the countries that I've mentioned. So our policies are policies that address racial injustice, social injustice, and climate injustice. Now, it's really important for us to realise that actually these policies, are directed at addressing a number of issues. We want to make sure that the air we breathe is invisible, you can't see it, has less toxicity. It's making our children sick. There are 4,000 premature deaths a year. Many of our children suffer from asthma. Many of our adults get dementia, heart disease, cancer, lung disease, all linked with this bad air. So our policies are addressing those ill health issues, but also our policies are addressing a situation where if the temperature of our planet rises by more than 1.5 degrees, it'll be catastrophic for not just London, but many of the countries where our families originate from. Parts of India and parts of Bangladesh are already seeing millions of people displaced. They're moving from coastal areas to the city. You go to Delhi or Mumbai, you go to Dhaka or other parts of Bangladesh, you're seeing massive inward migration from coastal areas. Those cities can't cope. So our policy is about helping people here, but also helping people thousands of miles away.
Okay, I think you kind of answered like why London is so important. Congratulations, obviously, on the chair of C40 as well. But why again is London, even though it's significantly so small, why is it so important to make the change from here?
So I think we've got to accept as the country that was at the start of the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution 150 years ago, we started burning coal and stuff. Actually, we've got a big responsibility for the problems our planet faces. So that's the first. We've got to accept that. Yeah, so the UK, the Empire, so forth, had a big role to play. The West had a big role to play, and the global North, when you look at the map, had a big role to play in the problems we're facing now. Ironically and perversely, it's the global South, the Indias, the Pakistans, the Sri Lankas, the Bangladeshis, the Ghanas, the Nigerias, the Jamaicas, and others, who are least responsible, but are feeling the biggest consequences. There's the irony that they have the smallest carbon footprint, but they suffer the worst consequences. So I think there's a moral issue here, moral leadership. We've got to lead the way. And so wouldn't it be great if, we were the first country responsible for these problems? Wouldn't it be great if we were the first city and country responsible for the solutions? I think it's poetic justice But also, unless we lead, how can we expect others to follow? How can we say to India, listen, don't develop and create jobs when we're not willing to do so? Because we're asking them to delay, cancel, stop using coal-powered power stations, right? And so we've got to show this moral leadership, because I think unless we show moral leadership, we won't be able to influence others. But also, one of the opportunities being chair of C40. C40 is almost 100 cities. Mumbai's rejoined. Cities all across the globe, Dhaka, LA, New York, London, Paris. We represent over 500 million people around the globe. We represent a quarter of the global economy. And so that gives us an opportunity to go into other cities around the world and these cities who are progressive to lead as one in their countries, because we can't wait for the national politicians. We can't wait for COPs. We can't wait for the UN. Rather than wait for the cavalry to arrive, let's do what we can.